This is Casey Moore, Oral History Assistant at UNC Charlotte Atkins Library, and today is May the 7th, 2020. I am interviewing remotely in Charlotte, North Carolina. And Adam, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Adam Johnson. I am an instructor at Northwest Vista College and a doctoral student at University of Texas at San Antonio. And yeah, I'm in Texas.
Excellent. So, Adam, tell us a little bit about where you're from originally.
I am from Broadway, North Carolina. It is a little tiny rural town in Lee County, the smallest county in North Carolina.
Is that coastal?
It is the major city, not really a major city, in Lee County is Sanford, and Sanford is the geological center of North Carolina.
Oh, okay.
The
I
Dead
have,
Sea between Raleigh and Fayetteville.
oh, I see. Okay. So in 2019, you were working for UNC Charlotte. How did you come to have that position?
I accepted a offer to go to grad school there, so I completed my master's degree at UNC Charlotte in anthropology. And during my final semester as a master's student, I got hired as an adjunct instructor to teach a liberal studies course. Actually, the same course that the shooting ended up happening in years later. And then after that semester ended, I stayed on as a lecturer until really until fall of 2018 or 2018, 2019, last fall.
Okay. So did you come back to teach in the fall of 2019? I'm
No,
sorry.
I
Yeah.
taught remotely
Okay.
for the sociology department.
Gotcha. So I want to open this up to you to tell us about that day, and share really anything that you would like to share. If you want to talk about your class, prior to the tragedy that did happen, that we can do that. It's just whatever you would like to tell me about April 30th.
Sure. Well, I mean, it was a pretty exciting day. It was the last day of the semester. It was also my last day teaching at UNCC because I had been accepted to a doctoral program here at UTSA. And so I was really excited. It was also the first day of team presentations, which is always really exciting because the teams in all of my classes spend all semester researching whatever the topic for that particular course is. And in the liberal studies course 2213, which is science and technology studies, the students have the opportunity to think about and research the kind of the dynamic nature of science. And so students can kind of choose between picking things that were held as scientific fact, but then were subsequently overturned or modified through like new theory or new technology or more data, or they can pick like ongoing scientific debates and discourse in kind of contemporary society. And so it's really exciting to see the projects get presented and come together. Of course, they're not all, 10 out of 10s or whatever, but they're often quite good and well thought out. And the topics that students pick are often, I'm really interesting, and people very rarely pick kind of really boring, banal topics because, they try to have fun with it as much as they can.
Mm-hmm.
And on April 30th, it was the first day of presentations, and we were just watching the first presentation, which was on, I think it was on like heliocentricity or something like that. It had to do with the solar system.
Mm.
And I'm not a physicist or astronomer or anything, but that stuff's still really interesting, and it's still the students have done an excellent job. And we got about probably 6 or 7 minutes into the presentation, and they have to be at least 10 minutes, or they have to be kind of within a minute of being 10 minutes, anywhere between 9 and 11 minutes. And so we're getting pretty close to the end of the first presentation, which was quite good. And I was sitting at the table, which I believe is table 8, right next to the podium, watching, because each of the tables in the room has like a TV monitor at it.
Hmm.
So I could, nobody in that on that team had shown up to class that day. Um, they were working on a project, and I gave them permission, so it was fun. And so my back was turned to the door that the shooter came in. Didn't hear the door open up, but heard the first shot, and then there was a pause, and then there was a series of a lot of other shots. And as the first shot kind of came out, I knew what a gun sounds like, and so I jumped up and kicked my chair out of the way and started moving students towards the other door. The room is a very kind of odd shape. There are two entrances on each side of the room. The room is really long. It's an active learning classroom, and the students were sitting at big round tables facing one another, and so they were all kind of paying attention to the TV screen and not watching the front of the classroom or whatever. And the shooter opened fire on the side of the classroom that's kind of closest towards the bathrooms and closest towards Prospector. The other classroom, or the other entrance to the classroom, was on the side, and the door that most people exited was over by the Center for Teaching and Learning in Kennedy. And uh, yet there people at table one some ended up being shot, but they hunkered down behind the table. The people at table two, the two people that were at table two, were the two students that were killed. And a student at table five also got shot, and it was it was an awful experience for everybody. And there are things that I saw, and just the conversation that I've had with some of the students that were in the room. It's like I don't want to go into details about stuff because it was kind of experience that we share, and I don't want to tell other people's stories and be the dominant voice of kind of people's experiences in the room. But yeah, we got students. I held the door open until everybody that I noticed got out. You can't see around to the other side of the classroom from once you're kind of out the door. And so once everybody that I saw was out, I moved over, and kind of since I was one of the last people out of the room, most of the students had already dispersed out into the big courtyard that's there, that's between Kennedy and Rowe. And so I kind of grabbed the last two or three students that were kind of right, they came out with me, and dragged them over into the quad, which is where Barnard is, where the anthropology department is. And we went up into Barnard because I knew that I was using Dr. Greg Sterrett's office as my office because he was on, I think, research sabbatical for that semester. So I was like, there's a locked door into the department, and then there's a locked door into my office. And so I could go into the department, and we would have put two locked doors between us and the shooter. The chair of the department was still there, so the department door was open, and Dr. Steve Falconer's door was open. So we went into the department, closed the door, and then got into Steve's office and closed that door. And
sorry, just to clarify, you had brought students with you?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and we got to his office, and I had him call 911 while I was kind of getting the students situated. And so he was on the phone with emergency services, and I was kind of feeding him information. And I had texted my partner, and she had also called 911, and she was able to kind of tell them the location where the classroom was, which was helpful, because she also taught in that building.
Oh, she taught at UNC Charlotte as well?
Yeah, she in the sociology department. So she taught there. So there's two classrooms in Kennedy. There's a really big active learning classroom, a small active learning classroom, and I generally taught in the big one, and she taught sociology courses in the small one.
I see.
And then come to talking to students in the classroom after the shooter had emptied his magazine and Riley had tackled him. He set his gun down and sat on the ground and just waited for the police to get there. So he was kind of just ready and waiting by the time the police showed up. I didn't see that. I mean, I was able to kind of see the whole shooting bit play out, but I didn't notice that he had put the gun down and sat down. But there were students still in the classroom that communicated that to me.
Right. So you and your students were on lockdown with the rest of the university. Um, when was your building cleared? How long were you kind of hunkered down in place?
Anywhere between like 30 minutes and 15 years. It felt forever.
I'm
It
sure.
was it was quite a while. We were not one of the first classrooms cleared. By the time we were cleared and we were, kind of ushered out by the police, there were like so many people that had already been let out. So it was quite a while.
Right. So what was your kind of experience over the next 24 hours? How do you communicate with students, and how do you kind of take in and absorb, what's happened and deal with that?
Well, I mean, immediately after, nobody would tell me who was shot. So a few days later, kind of all the memories started rushing back. But kind of in the immediate aftermath and being in shock, like I couldn't remember seeing anything. I just remember like hearing stuff, and I remember like what my body did. But I don't remember like I didn't remember at the time what I saw until probably 2 days later or so. And I was asking, well, I had gone to police officer, like I was the faculty member for the classroom where the shooting happened, and then they eventually kind of got me where I needed to go to give my statement. And I was asking people, like, like who was shot, like tell me some information, and eventually found where um, the injured students had been taken to, and went there immediately the next morning. So as soon as visiting hours at the hospital started, I was at the hospital with three of the students. One student had already been discharged from the hospital, but the other three students were still there. So I immediately went there, and the next morning, but the night before, the night the shooting happened, I went over to Dr. John Marks and Dr. Peter Katz's house. They live pretty close to our house, or where we lived when we lived in Charlotte. And John was my graduate advisor. Peter was one of my professors, and they're also two of my best friends and mentors. And so John was teaching at the time too, but actually in the classroom right next to the anthropology department. So not too far away from the where the shooting happened, but kind of on the other side of the building.
Hmm.
And so he's like, if you need something, just come over. Actually, I think he just told me, he's like, come over to the house. And I stayed there. My partner and I, she picked me up from um, where we were being interviewed by the police, and then drove me over to my car, which is still on campus. They took us off campus to be interviewed. And then we drove over to John and Peter's house and stayed there for several hours talking. And then I think the next like 2 or 3 nights, maybe more than that, we were at John and Peter's house every night, and they were taking care of us really well.
Right. Which hospital were the students taken to? I don't think anyone's brought that up yet.
Oh gosh, I don't. I know they were initially taken to the hospital that's right next to the university,
Uh-huh.
but when they had been transferred over to kind of a more comprehensive facility, it's over near Elizabeth. I can't remember the name of the hospital, but that's the
Okay.
hospital they were at.
Gotcha. Were the students happy to see you?
Well, Drew was not doing really well. He was really severely injured, and
Mhm.
he was kind of in and out of it. Um, Emily was, happy to see me. We had, spent a lot of time talking in class, anyways. And Drew had too, because he's a Red Sox fan, and so we talked about baseball.
Mhm.
And then Rami was the happiest to see me. He was doing pretty well. He had a lot of his friends there, and his dad. A few days later, ended up flying in from Saudi Arabia, and I got to meet his dad and stuff, and go around campus and
Oh,
chat.
good.
Yeah, and I met everybody's parents. I didn't get to see Sean immediately after the shooting, just because he had already been discharged and gone back home. I think he lived in Apex, or like not far from where I'm actually from.
So,
Actually, Drew's from like right down the road from him, which was kind of interesting.
hmm.
But I ended up meeting up with Sean several days later. We went and got, I think we went to, I think we went to a Vietnamese restaurant, um, uh, maybe a week or two later, something like that. I can't remember the exact kind of timeline of everything, but it was like pretty soon after. We went and had lunch together, and I got to see him. It was that I think seeing the students was really cathartic because just knowing that like they were okay. Drew was a lot. It was a lot more harrowing because of the type of injuries that he had, but
Hmm.
that was pretty scary. But um, and then there was just other issues associated with that too. But
Right.
I still talk to them like fairly regularly. So
Oh, that's great. How did you communicate with your class? Because I know that it seemed like most people, or a lot of people, followed your blog posts kind of immediately after the shooting had occurred. And correct me if I'm wrong, it's been a year since I've read that, but I think that you kind of discussed that, what happened kind of stays, what they tell you in confidence kind of stays with you, and that, you weren't going to really talk to the press so much about their individual experiences.
yeah, and I'm trying to like give salient information here without kind of overstepping what I feel like is my kind of moral obligations to them.
Absolutely. Is it something that you ended up emailing your class afterward, um,
Yeah.
and
hmm
making sure they're connected with resources?
Yeah, so I went through the kind of Canvas emailer, and I sent out an email to all of the students, actually in all of my classes, but especially in the liberal studies class. I think I was teaching like four sections, um, and actually I was teaching two sections, and then I was like the biological anthropology lab director for that semester. So, but I ended up giving them my cell phone number so they could contact me if they needed anything, and trying to figure out like what resources were available, because in that immediate moment, like many universities trying to scramble to get resources together for students and whatnot.
Right. So this happened, I think it was 10 days before commencement was scheduled. Um, and I know that the chancellor's office reached out to the families and had Reed and Riley's families at commencement. Were you involved in any of that planning or asked?
Nope.
Hmm.
I talked to I think the vice provost, and I was like, if Reed and Riley's families are interested in talking to me, like here's my information, please get up with me. And I heard back that they were going to be at graduation, and I was like, all right, so I was already I'd already been planning to be like the faculty liaison for graduation, where I was going to kind of organize. I think I was in charge of the graduate students, getting them lined up properly and getting their cards and stuff.
Hmm.
And so I was at graduation. I at no point, and I like to talk to people, and at no point did anybody give me the opportunity to meet them. If I was that like the latest blog post that I wrote about this experience, where I talk about being hurt. That's where I think really when things started like getting to me was I was never given the opportunity um, to to meet with the parents, and evidently like eventually months later, actually through the chancellor's office, had at least emailed with them, and uh, yeah, I mean they definitely wanted to meet me. I had different reactions from the different families, which is fine, and they're entitled to react however they feel is necessary. But there was definitely a sense that they were hurt that I didn't they didn't perceive me reaching out to make an effort to meet with them, which I had done that, and it was just at the time. it was, I rationalized it by saying, well, the university's too busy trying to like scramble things together. They're still trying to get, graduation complete. They're still trying to figure out resources for students and faculty. They're still trying to figure out what to do with the building. And so like, I, just didn't want to feel like I needed to be the priority because
Mm-hmm.
I probably wasn't the biggest priority at the time. And I just got the notion that I just kind of, not that they didn't care and didn't want to make an effort, but then just kind of my interest got just slipped through the cracks or whatever.
Right. How was that summer for you? Did you teach any or?
I did. I did. I taught online. It was crazy. We moved to San Antonio like on June 24th. So it was insane. We got to San Antonio. My daughter, who lives in California, was visiting with us. It was a lot. It was a new city where we didn't know anybody really. Um, Getting moved, driving, halfway across the country. It was it was hard, but it was probably a good thing that I ended up having to be just like so inundated with moving and unpacking the house, and just prepping for this doctoral program, which UTSA has been absolutely fantastic. With everything and being really supportive and making sure that I get support. But yeah, that summer was very frenetic just because of the moving and getting prepped for the doctoral program. Having an 8-year-old in the house at the time, she was 8. I was super busy. Um, just didn't really have time to, I think, marinate in the experiences all that much, just because there was other stuff that had to be done. Yet again, maybe a good thing, maybe bad in other ways, but it is what it is, I guess.
Hmm. So pretty quickly after this tragedy occurred, a remembrance committee was put together um, to start talking about how to um, remember that day and how to honor the students. Were you involved in any of that planning, or did they reach out to you for input?
No, I think I got one email that asked about. Actually, I wasn't involved in any of it at the very beginning, and then months and months later, after I found out like the committee was put together, I got an email kind of after the first little sets of email with ideas that they had were sent out, asking if I wanted to have any input. At that point, I think that it was actually I was already in the doctoral program, so I was doing coursework and stuff, and I was teaching online at UNCC still, and I don't I probably emailed them back, but I don't remember what I would have said in the email. It's all that time is kind of hazy, but yeah, I wasn't consulted until farther into the process.
Right. Um, so you left campus and left Charlotte and really didn't get to kind of come back to campus the next year to see any measured, change in the university or change in the students or the community as a whole. Um, but while you were there, do you feel like the university was more supported by the community? What were your thoughts on how the community came together in the wake of this shooting?
Oh yeah, like the Charlotte community, kind of that the area that the kind of outreach was amazing. Um, they were a really strong bond that was built. Uh, I got hundreds of people reached out to me, not just in Charlotte, although lots of people in Charlotte reached out to me. Some kind of irritatingly, like a bunch of reporters that were just trying to have a story, but just like local people also reached out. Then, of course, probably more than 100 anthropologists around the world reached out to me, which that was another community that was really supportive in it. Yeah, so I think that the students really came together. There were some really beautiful like demonstrations of just empathy and people being people, uh, and then um, and then Charlotte as a whole really, I think, showed their support and why Charlotte's a good city to have that university in.
Yeah. Did you attend the vigil on May the 1st?
I didn't. Yeah, it was like the day
It
after.
was the day after.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I was. I didn't sleep the night of the 30th, and
Hmm.
the what I told my partner. I think a couple people asked me what I told my partner, um, Dr. Stara Pollock. I was like, I don't want this to be made about me. Like this is about the vigils for the students that got, killed and injured,
Yeah.
and I'm physically fine, and so I don't want to make this about me, because I'll be the one getting. I'll be taking attention away from I think what the the important thing is in the moment. So
Hmm.
I felt like it would have been a distraction for me to be there.
Right. Um, so we mentioned that we're interviewing remotely. Um, partly because you are in Texas and I'm in Charlotte, but also, many of our states are now under these orders to shelter in place because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so there were all of these remembrance events planned for this year that, obviously were supposed to be physical events that we could all participate in and take part in. And in the span of about 3 weeks, a lot of that was moved online. But can you tell me, did the university reach out to you about those events?
I got the kind of same email that everybody got as they were planning the events. Eventually, I think probably in January, maybe December, probably in January, February, though, I get an email from Dr. Steve Faulkner, the chair of the anthropology department, telling me that the chancellor was trying to reach out to, or wanted to reach out to me, and if I could give him like an email address that wasn't a university email address. I wasn't by that point. Yeah, it had to have been this year because I wasn't checking my email anymore, my UNCC email, because I wasn't teaching there. Um, and so yeah, I gave him my personal email address, and the chancellor sent me an email, basically saying like, hey, there's this remembrance event, and we want to invite you. Tickets are $25, but we're happy to waive the cost of attendance for you. Um, and I responded back, I appreciate the invitation, but I'm in Texas. Can't, I'm not going to fly to Charlotte on my own dime as a broke graduate student to attend this. I just if I'm
Hmm.
going to buy plane tickets, it's going to be to fly my daughter to visit me. And
Right.
I was like, I appreciate it. I didn't hear anything back from him after that point at all. He didn't respond back like, okay, no problem or whatever. But I got the sense that nobody knew that I didn't live in Charlotte anymore.
Mm, right. So there was no email back to you about even, you being involved in any of the events as well. Okay.
No, yeah, nothing at all.
Interesting. Did you attend the virtual event that was held?
No, I didn't. One, it's just certain kinds of trauma that to me that event wasn't for the people that were there. We were there. We know what happened. We remember our classmates, our colleagues, every single day. We don't get to take a day off to stop thinking about it. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about it. That I don't think about Emily and Sean and Drew and Rami and Reed and Riley. So uh, it's like we don't need a day of remembrance. Every day is a day of remembrance for us.
Hmm.
And that's been true for the other students too that I've talked to about this.
Right. So, in kind of speaking in that same vein, how would you say that this has affected you? I mean, I know that's quite a loaded question, but as an educator, and I'm sure you are still teaching in physical classrooms. Um, do you have any thoughts that you want to share on that?
Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, I was still actually teaching the very next week after that. I was still teaching at the community college in Charlotte. So I went in the next week. That was the last week of classes for them, and I taught my class, and that was really hard because everything had just happened. The students were absolutely great though. And then since then, it's it's been hard this semester teaching in person at Northwest Vista. I'm also a teaching assistant at UTSA, so I have moments where I'm like, which of the person in this classroom is going to be the person that pulls out a gun and starts shooting, and that's a terrible way to think about people. So it's like not only do those intrusive thoughts happen, but like I don't want to think negatively about anybody. I try to be a positive person. I try to give everybody the benefit of the doubt, and so like there's this extreme, feeling of guilt when those thoughts happen, and I'm like, why are you thinking terrible things? If these are engaged students, they want to be here. Um, yeah, that being in the classroom has been challenging. I don't think I'm as funny and as animated as I used to be, and maybe that's something that'll come back as my comfort level goes up. But I can definitely say that like I sweat way more when I teach now than I did beforehand.
Hmm.
I think it's just like my anxiety being higher.
Right. Which community college were you teaching at in Charlotte?
Uh, CPCC.
Okay.
Yes, I was teaching that semester. I was teaching at the one that was on WT Harris. It's kind of between UNCC and our house,
Hmm.
whichever campus that is. I forget what the name of it is.
Yeah, I should know that. That's right by my house. um, but yeah, were you teaching anthropology classes there as well?
Yeah, they just have one. The college just has one anthropology class. It's like general anthropology. So I was teaching that.
Mm. Um, do you want to speak any to how you feel like this has affected, like you and your partner, with her also being, or them also being on campus and um, having taught on campus?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's like affected her in terms of teaching, um, and I mean she would be much better to speak to that than me. Um, but I mean, she worries about me all the time. Like I still like the last week and a half or 2 weeks, like I've been having nightmares regularly and stuff, and I just have sometimes I have really bad days, and she worries about me because my anxiety level is like really high, or like I get really depressed, and of course she's a great partner, and she can tell when something's bothering me. Um, I think the for her the biggest thing is the concern that she has for me and wanting to make sure that like I'm okay.
Hmm.
Um,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Um, are there, well, I guess I don't know if you've seen the Remembrance Commission kind of put out some suggested ways that they wanted to remember Reed and Riley. And I believe the chancellor had accepted those recommendations. Do you want to speak to how you would like to see them remembered, since you knew them and had them in class, or have you followed the report that the commission sent out?
No, I haven't seen the report, but I mean, this is something that Dr. Peter Katz and I talked about a lot, and Dr. John Marks to a lesser degree, but something that Peter and I really had long conversations about when I was still in Charlotte, and we kind of both came to the conclusion it needed to be like some kind of living remembrance. And for me, it can't just be like a sign or a plaque or naming a building or something, because to make the point, the building where the shooting happened, Kennedy, I forget who I was talking to, but I was like, "Who is that named after?" And they're like, "I have no idea." I'm like, "That's the point. Like, just naming a building after somebody, they're gonna forget them."
Mm-hmm.
And so that's not enough. It has to be something that's living, something that every new cohort of students that come in, they go through SOAR or whatever, or convocation, like the names of the people that were killed and injured in that classroom need to be like part of UNCC culture, where every person that comes in as a student has to remember them as part of being just a student at UNCC. And it needs to be something living, something that's positive, that really does capture the spirit and essence of Reed and Riley. They were both awesome. I mean, they were great students. Well, one of my favorite tables to sit and talk to because they were on that team. There was a couple of other students on their team as well that I had taught in other classes, and so I spent a lot of time at that table. And Riley loved Star Wars, and so we talked about that a lot because I'm a big Star Wars fan, and he's also like interested in conservation. And a lot of my work has to do with wildlife conservation.
Mm.
And then Reed was awesome. We had lots of conversations. I remember one conversation we had where we were just he was into like computer science was I think his major, and we talked about like how does he think that you can take anthropology because it was a liberal studies class, but it was kind of an anthropology of science class. How can you take this stuff and like make use of it as a computer scientist? And like just the kind of creative and inventive ways that he was thinking about like applying
Mhm.
the class to his own like thinking and his own kind of career aspirations was really great. And otherwise pretty quiet in class. He definitely contributed to his team, but when we had big class discussions, I mean, he was much more quiet and reserved when he said stuff. It was important and it was poignant. Um, but there was never any wasted breath there. If he was going to say,
Right.
it was going to matter.
It's great to have those memories.
Yeah, and so it really just needs to be something living that honors them. Um, yeah, I don't know what that looks like. That's way outside of my area of expertise.
Hmm.
Um, but I think there are ways that that can be done.
Yeah, I think that's well said. Um, are there any other thoughts or insights that you'd like to share related to what happened or related to, any of your experiences in the aftermath?
Yeah, nothing that I had like already said in like my blog posts or whatever. Um, I try to keep a lot of stuff close to the chest, but when something really is getting to me or an idea that I have is just kind of rattling around in my head, like I try to get it out. Putting it in the blog like gets me held accountable for it because other people are going to read it, especially when I write about the shooting. Like, I'll write something that I think is really interesting, about hummingbirds or, something anthropological. And it might get, like in the first week of publishing it, it might get, 300 reads or whatever.
Hmm.
Anytime I write about a shooting, like you can almost guarantee that it's going to, in the first week, it's going to get more than 1,000. Um, and then the first thing that I posted immediately after, I mean, there's like hundreds of thousands of people have read that at
Hmm.
this point. So
Yeah, and I think that there are a lot of people at UNC Charlotte that are still following your blog and that also kind of fought for you to be included in the remembrance event. Um, but yeah, I think that. Do any of your students follow, or any of your past students follow your blog?
yeah, there's a lot of students that read it. Even like people at UTSA have like found me. I don't talk about the blog existing or whatever, but people end up finding it. If you Google Adam Johnson Anthropology, you're going to see a bunch of stuff on the shooting. And my blog's going to
Right.
come up.
Gotcha.
And all students like to Google their professors or their TAs or whatever.
Hmm.
So people end up at that at the blog anyways. But yeah, I've had people like come up to me and ask me nothing inappropriate to read or whatever, but they'll say like, oh, like I found your blog and read it, and they'll like refer to some blog piece that I wrote that they found interesting.
Hmm. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today, and to share your experience. Um, and yeah, good luck with your studies
Thank
and
you.
your degree. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now.